Do you ever see a successful woman on your feed or in a magazine and think, wow, it must be nice to have it so easy? Well, think again. Behind that glossy cover or smiling face is a ton of hard work, countless failures, and endless learning experiences. I'm Rebecca Minkoff, and I'm here to tell you that success isn't a walk in the park. It takes grit, resilience, and a willingness to take risks. That's why I created Superwomen, a podcast that peels back the varnish and gets into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to make it as a woman in today's world. From luminaries and game changers to women you've never heard of but should, this podcast is here to inspire you to take your next leap, no matter how daunting it may seem. We'll explore the sacrifices these women have made, the highs and lows they've experienced, and the lessons they've learned along the way. So if you're ready to be inspired and learn from some of the most successful women out there, join me on Superwomen. Together, we'll uncover the stories behind the successes and prove that with hard work, determination, and a little bit of luck, anything is possible. Hey everyone, you're listening to Superwomen. Today's guest is the incredible Tina Wells, someone I am so proud that I can call a good friend. Tina started her company at the ripe young age of 16, and since then has built multiple companies, including an entire best-selling book franchise, a consulting company, a class and a course that teaches founders how to scale at retail. And I think when we get into this conversation, the advice she gives, the pearls of wisdom of someone who has seen it, built it, and then built it for others is really valuable. She has built 2 7-figure brands at major retailers, authored 21 books, scaled her service-based coaching business, and helped countless founders. So I think she knows what she's talking about, and she's been doing this for almost 30 years. She is one of the nicest, most pleasant, most giving people I've ever met. So take a listen to Miss Tina Wells. Tina, welcome to the podcast. As a dear friend, I'm so excited to have you on.
I'm so excited to be here. It's taken forever, but I'm so excited.
I know, and that's all my fault.
No, it's like...
You mentioned before we started recording that you've been like this since you were 16. So I'd like you to tell me at 16, what were you like? Because I feel like I'm like, oh my God, this woman is so accomplished and she does so many very different things, which we'll get into. But at 16, I guess you were doing very different things.
It's funny. I feel like I do different things that are all the same and all leading in the same direction. So I started my career when I was 15 because I answered an ad in the back of 17 magazine, and I became a product review editor for a newspaper for girls. And that led me into 20 plus career in marketing. So I started out in market research. I was one of the very first people in millennial marketing doing influencer stuff before it was even called influencer. Back in the day, we called it trendspotting. I had you remember this, right? A very famous newsletter called Tina's Top 10. I feel like we're getting back to newsletter culture these days, right? It's becoming a big thing again. And I spent 20 years building marketing and strategy for hundreds of brands. Very fortunate. I got to build the Super Soul 100 for Oprah Winfrey Network. So I got to do a lot of that kind of stuff, and then decided I wanted to pivot. I was really fortunate to work with Target for almost 5 years, building my own brands, launching a lot of books. And now I'm focused on helping founders grow their brands, like really exponentially grow their brands through making the right agency decisions, the right consulting decisions, hiring the right people to really build to a really big exit. And so that feels really exciting right now. And I'm very much focused on helping female founders, but really small business owners in general. I've been a small business owner since I was a teenager. And so I think now more than ever, I'm even more passionate about how we help small businesses grow. And that's what I get to do.
So at 16, how were you just naturally someone that wanted to be an entrepreneur and you knew the path, or did it take a lot of trial and error for you to be like, oh, this lane feels right?
My parents will say I've been the same person my entire life, but I think, and you grew up in this culture, like back in the day, people in general, men and women, were incredibly supportive. You know, I was very fortunate in my career. I always got told the next step by someone, like a fairy godmother or godfather who would say, I want to meet with you. You should be doing this. You need to figure this out. Go do this. And I always had someone who would help me with the next thing. Now, the work was on me to do it, to figure it out. But I was really lucky to be guided, to have someone say, hey, you're doing this thing for free, but I just paid this person $25,000. Like, go figure this out. So I was always being coached and given advice. I still feel like today I get coached and given advice on how to make the next move or what the next thing should be that I'm looking into.
And then when you started writing fiction, mostly for girls, and I want you to talk about that, like how did you even know how to do that? And then you became incredibly successful at that. Like that's also something that is not just like, oh, I write a couple books and I'm a best-selling author and I have my everything in Target and a whole.
Again, it was a client. I happened to, back in 2006, I was marketing a book that was sold by Alloy Media and Marketing. So a lot of people don't know that like Gossip Girl, Sisterhood, and the Traveling Pants, like were created by marketing companies, right? That were very similar to what I was doing. And so I actually had been hired to market this book called like Inside the Mind of Gideon Rayburn. And in talking to that editor, she kept pushing me and she's like, you could do this. I literally just bought a book for a lot of money from someone who does what you do. And I'm like, well, I'm very busy with my company. I don't know. And then I was working on some focus groups for a very large company around this new customer called a tween. And a mom stopped me during a focus group break and said, hey, you know about these things. My daughter is 10. She's reading Gossip Girl. What should I do? And then, as the entrepreneur in me, I saw a problem and I thought, well, I could come up with something that's just as interesting, but good. And that literally started Mackenzie Blue and, sold hundreds of thousands of copies of that series. And then the Z Files, which I did in partnership with Target, was a spin-off of that. And Honest June right now is doing really well, about a girl who can't tell a lie. And the Stitch Click, about a tight-knit group of friends who meet in a fashion class. Like, I love middle grade. I love, love, love the tween girl. But it started with someone suggesting it to me, right? Saw my skill set and said, you would be really good at this. And my first reaction was, I don't have time. But then as I started to think about it, I'm like, maybe I could carve out a place in the market for this.
How is it though that you carve out everything you do? Because writing a book, marketing a book, I'm marketing my paperback, which has already been written, and it's still a full-time job. And you're consulting. Like, how have you then designed your life in order to fit all of this?
So I remember I would get asked this question a lot. How do you have time for everything? And I would say, and I'm being honest, imagine what my life was like as a 16-year-old student, right? I was up every day by 5:30. I played field hockey. I was the editor of the paper. I was on the yearbook, right? So in a lot of ways, I only got to work on my business for maybe 2 hours a day. So I remember going to college and feeling like, wow, I have more time to spend on my company. So every decade, I feel like I get more time. And so, one, from a very young age, I was really maniacal about how I spend my time. I also have a very large family. I'm the oldest of 6 children. We're super close. Um, and so I knew all the things that were really important. I wrote the book, The Elevation Approach, about creating work-life harmony, because I quickly realized balance is just not an attainable thing, right? Because more work means more fun, means more work, right? It's just you're piling things. And I figured out for me, there's a formula where all the things have to work together, right? So I think it's, you're going to go through a season. If you're launching a book, you are working a lot on launching that book. So the idea that you can just, in the middle of a book launch, take a 3-week vacation makes no sense, right? It is not possible. It's not going to happen.
Or do anything else,
Or do
frankly.
anything else. But can you schedule a dinner with friends? Yes. And I would suggest you do, to get the energy to keep going, right? So I think sometimes we overcorrect, and that's the problem with balance, is you don't have the time in your day to add just as much fun and just as much play as the work you have. If you're in a busy season with the kids, that's what it is, and you have to embrace that. And I think instead we're taught, well, I'm doing too much family stuff, so I really have to overload here. And it's like, no, we just kind of have to embrace what's happening and just figure out, like, how do we harmonize whatever is going on? How do we just add a bit of harmony?
How do you add that to your life now? Because you are now a product where you are the one helping companies scale and you are not scalable.
Yeah. The very first thing I did before I decided I wanted to really focus on, a set of founders to work with, was I did create a product that could help the masses. So I spent last year doing that. And I've learned in my preparation season to kind of think about these things instead of burning myself out. I said, well, I'll create the Retail Business Accelerator. So now there's a beautifully built course product that can help any founder trying to do business in retail, right? If you're just a new founder trying to understand business fundamentals, go into the Founders Framework. I wrote the Retail Business Blueprint book, right? So I feel like those are my ideas. You can take them, it can support the masses, but no, I can't scale myself. And so I got really great advice from a friend, and he told me, you have to do the things only you can do. And that's a big one, right? To really think, if you think about how you show up, you are showing up to the things only you can do. And if we do more of that, and if we kind of find people better than us to do the other things, that's how we kind of scale ourselves in a way.
How would you advise someone let go? Because I meet a lot of people. I'm now like, I'm letting go. I'm letting go. I can't do that. I'm not good at that. Not good at that. You take that. But so many people are holding on because it has to be perfect. And I'm at the like, we're moving at a speed and a pace because I'm not trying to make it perfect.
You know what I realized once, and I don't know if you've had this experience, when I started doing really big things, I had to let my idea of perfectionism go because the train is moving, right? You're not controlling. Like, I remember I would go into Target stores and I wouldn't want to see my product because I knew in my mind it wasn't as perfect as I knew it could have been, right? But I had to let it go. At some point, you have purchase orders, you have delivery dates, you have shipment dates. Like, it's got to go, you know. And I was telling a friend a story of I got final samples and I looked at this sample and I'm like, this color is off. I'm sorry. The whole thing, right, has to be redone. You get one round to do that. You don't get 50. I would have gone another 2 or 3 because I'm like, oh, it's just not what the customer, like, it's just not right. But I've learned the bigger the thing I was doing, the more the train was moving and people were moving, and I had to let some of that go. Doesn't mean that you're not going to, walk into one of your stores and say, oh, this should have been a little bit better. But we've learned almost how to not, let the perfectionism or the need to be perfect overtake getting things done. And my customers loved my product, even though I would look at it and say, there's one thing I would have changed. They're still so happy with it, So I've
Yeah.
had to learn to let a bit of that go. It doesn't mean it's always going to be a part of my personality. I think that's founders. We want to see the best vision. And I often think always about the person buying something from me, and I want them to have the best experience. And so I don't ever, someone calls me difficult or particular, that's not insulting to me because I'm doing that on behalf of my customer, not for me, because they deserve the absolute best for the money that they're investing in anything I'm doing. And so, but it has been a lesson, and it just, I remember the moment where it was like, this bus is leaving whether or not I'm on it. So, do the best you can always. But in our mind, what's perfect, people are sometimes happy with 50% of what we might see as like the ultimate goal.
Yeah, that's definitely a problem that I faced with bags because I'd be like, oh, I could tinker and try and correct this for the next 9 years, and it's not. And the customer doesn't actually know or sometimes care.
It's true.
So, what would you say? In your book, you talk about not having this whole idea of balance, which I firmly don't believe in. What are you saying to women or men who read the book who are trying to figure out how they're designing their life?
One, I think our lives move so fast, right? I think we don't allow ourselves enough moments of introspection, right? And it doesn't mean it has to be this, I'm going on a retreat for 7 days, like check in for 5 minutes. What's going well? What's not going well? How am I feeling in this moment? Do I feel overwhelmed? Do I feel good? Do I feel like things are moving the right way? I think you can't decide anything if you're not taking a moment to pause. I think in our mind, we've conditioned ourselves to think the pause has to be a lot longer than it really has to be. A big part of the book, I'm asking you to ask yourself a lot of questions. And I try to do that check-in with myself. One way I do it is just looking at my calendar. I actually have different things colored differently for different reasons, like my work schedule and my personal schedule. I just do a quick look at my week to see, is there enough me in this calendar, right? And if there's not, I can prepare myself to say, oh, wow, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, they're going to be hectic. Make sure you're seeing your sisters on Friday. You're going to need that check-in, right? So I now try to avoid the burnout as best I can. And the way I can do that is like am I using my rituals? So I talk about these 12 principles of instant elevation. I always have about 3 that are really important to me. If I start to feel out of alignment, I have a go-to. Like for me, I travel a lot, so I can wake up anywhere in the world. My thing is I have a hot beverage wherever I am. That just kind of grounds me in the morning, right? I need that. And it seem like a small thing, but I'm starting my morning how I would always start a morning, so I feel like myself, right? I don't might not have the time to like explore the city. It would be great. We've had trips where we're in an amazing place. We don't have a day. Do we have an hour? Can I schedule one thing in the trip that's like, I'm doing one thing I want to do for myself, whatever that is. And so, it's these tiny things. I think we need tiny things sometimes when life feels like it takes up so much space in our calendar.
Do you find that you, in spite of all this, with managing so much, books, products, family, consulting, like you just have moments where you're just like, I need to check out and turn off?
Absolutely. And I also think kind of giving ourselves permission to have like really human experiences. My dad last year had a stint in the ICU for 7 weeks. It was not expected. And it was
Yeah.
hard, and I had to give I got to feel whatever I'm feeling right now. And I remember one of the first things I did, like my first rule, the first principle is declutter your space. And I was joking with my sisters. I had this pantry and I was like, the whole thing came out. I was like, I don't know how this is helping me, but I need to channel this anxiety I'm feeling. And I redid this whole pantry and, did it solve? No, he was in the ICU for 7 weeks, but there was something about me saying, I have to make space. I don't know what I'm decluttering for, but maybe I needed the emotional space, right? It was just something I did and it was a small thing. But it helped a lot with what we had to have the stamina to deal with. And I think for so many of us, I don't have children. I have a niece and my nephews, but I have aging parents. And I think like that there's stuff that just happens in life that you cannot plan and you have to make time and space for, right? I think those are the hard things there were days when I was sitting in his room in the ICU and I was working, and that was work. There were days when a brother or sister asked someone at the hospital, is there a place I can get on Zoom? I have to take a really important call, and I think we just have to give ourselves permission to say that's sometimes what life looks like, and first give ourselves grace to say, yes, this is what's happening. It's a little bit messy right now, but we're going to get things done.
Become fearless and focused in pursuit of your dreams. In my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success, now available in paperback, I share personal stories and practical advice I've learned along the way in pursuit of my own, in fashion world and in my personal life. I talk about how persistence and courage have been the keys to my success. I share my journey of building a company and the challenges I've faced along the way. By refusing to give up and constantly stepping out of my comfort zone, I was able to break through the unspoken rules that have held women back for far too long. My hope through writing this book is to encourage you to face your own fears and take risks when going for your own goals. Fearlessness is a choice, and we all have the power to make it. The book is now available in paperback, including updated content and a new bonus chapter. So, being that your parents said you've been the same since you were 16 or maybe longer, I've never once seen you frazzled, depressed, not chipper, and you are so selfless. You are like, oh yeah, you need an introduction to Target? Great. How else can I help you? Like at least for me, you've always been so selfless. Where does that come from? Has that been innate in you since you've been born, or have you worked hard to get there in our advanced age, Tina?
I can't believe we're advancing in age like
You're
this.
younger than me, but
No,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm older than you.
You are?
Yeah.
Don't fucking look it. I'll tell you that much.
I'm gonna be 45 in April.
Oh, okay. So we're like 6 months apart.
Yeah. Um, my mom and dad would say I've always been this way, but I think growing up in such a large family, and I think your children are going to get the benefit of this. When you have a big family, it's like a machine that's moving, right? And everyone has to operate in a way of being considerate to each other. My parents made this very cool bathroom growing up where it was like outside where there was like a sink so someone could be getting ready and doing makeup, and there's another one in the main bathroom. But like you weren't going in and taking 45-minute showers when six
Right.
kids,
You didn't have that choice.
right? and it just all the considerations. So I feel like we've always been that way, and we're so close now. And so it's not like we moved away from that consideration, even down to like a schedule in the hospital, who's going to be there when, like, we all, no matter how busy we were, it's like we're all part of this, right? So I think feeling a part of a community that's really important has always grounded me. And my siblings are still my most important community, right? So it doesn't matter what's happening in the outside world. Like, I've got to be in this community. And I would always joke, like, if I acted a way people thought I might act, my sisters wouldn't want to go on vacation with me. And then what would I do? And I love my friends, but like, I also come from a really large family. My dad's an only child, but my mom has 13 brothers and sisters. And so I have 127 cousins plus on my mom's side. And we're all so close. And so I think growing up, I had a very tight community. My mom's the 12th out of 14, so most of my cousins are older, right? So I also like knew my place. I was like, my older cousins are so cool. So I just like, that's the person I am. And we kind of joke about things like, if people only saw the things that like we're doing in the family, it's like we just get in where we fit in. Our titles don't matter. The work we do doesn't matter. We just want to be part of this community. And so I think I grew up always, like my mom would say, it felt like there was mom, dad, and Tina on one side, and then the kids, right? And I was the oldest, so I always felt and still feel very responsible for my younger siblings. But I don't know, I love my work. I love the work I get to do, but I also just see myself within my family as like, that's my place. That's where I belong and what I love. And I prioritize that. And so work is great, but I feel like I only had my career at 16 because so many people took the time to help me. And so that's the way I always pay it forward. I had a tremendous amount of help. No, you do not just start a company at 16, without someone saying, hey, you need to do this, and so I'm fortunate, and I want to pay that forward.
I love it. So being that you're advising people in different realms, when we were talking, like it's 1 to 10 million, 10 to 50, 50 to 100, do you have different, very tactical advice? If you were to say from 0 to 100, there's 4 buckets, let's just say. We'll divide it in $25 million quarters of what you think you've seen founders do that have been the unlock, or what you've told them to do that's been the unlock?
Yeah, I think there's one area where across the board, if you don't do this right, it's like a killer for the business. Um, there's always a point where someone says, I need to hire an agency, a consultant, a person, right? And then we normally spend a certain amount of time vetting who those people are. And then we onboard, and that takes more time. And then maybe there's a time where it's like, this is not working. And then we offboard. And then like that time you've just spent mismanaging money, the hire, your time, you've lost time, right? So when your trajectory is this, then you stall and you're wondering, how did I stall? And now you've got to double what you've just done, right? So I find hiring exactly the right people at the right time. When we look at companies, we look at unicorn, what makes them a unicorn? First and foremost, they nailed product market fit, right? Out of the gate, clearly understood that assignment, got it right. And then it's not just, I think there's this idea of getting the right people on the bus and then deciding where the bus goes. I think it's knowing the destination and putting exactly the right people in the right seats and having a formula for how you get there, right? Every company, I believe, does need a unique formula to how they get there. But once you have it, it's being really clear about this is what our culture is. This is what it means to work here. Because things don't work. Well, that wasn't a culture fit. But why didn't we understand that at the beginning, right? Were we not clear? You hear about Warby Parker giving you their favorite books and think like they were so clear day one, this is the culture,
Yeah. Yeah.
And that matters. It matters because then people are like, I have an understanding for what I'm signing up for. And then you get the right people in the right seats and they do the right thing. And they do the thing that they've done, right? Sometimes as founders, I think we can be really optimistic and think, if I just get the right person and get them on the bus, we'll figure out where they're going to go. It doesn't always work well when you're really trying to grow and you have very specific goals and very specific metrics, right? And I think as you grow, it's pairing the talent you need for the growth that you want, right? And people who do this well can identify the talent that's going to take them to where they want to go next.
Yeah, I feel like some of the fastest growing brands, it's not necessarily even that their product was better, is that they knew how to hire the right people. That's the shitty part.
Like exactly like you see them and you're like, whoa, that was a shrewd, right? You're just like, that was really, really spot on for what they're trying to do.
Yeah. So what made you realize at what point you went from product creator to advisor on product creators? Was that a hard pivot for you? Was like, I know for me, whenever I have to like stop doing something good or bad that I had a lot of energy and excitement behind to focus on something else, it's hard for me and I'm trying to get faster at it. Was that moment hard or?
I think a lot of times we know what we need to do. I think the timing is accepting it, and actually moving. Um, I loved the product development and design part of what I was doing at retail, but what I started to realize I loved more was solving problems I'd see pop up, and I think you work with a lot of big retailers. Big retailers have issues, challenges that are very unique to big retail. A lot of their focus is spent on that, but they want small businesses. So you're right, small businesses add that surprise and delight to big retail, but then they don't speak the same language, right? It would be so helpful if you went in understanding all these different words that big retail, and I was in a very privileged position in meetings to say, I don't know what that means. What is ISM? What is POS? Right. I would just ask the question and then I'd make a note and say, I don't want anybody else to have to ask that question. So let me just write it in my book that I knew early on. I mean, the day I got my like pamphlet to working with my retail partner, I remember thinking, oh, I need to make this a thing because there's so much more here. And there's a lot of feeling like you're learning something new every day with retail. And I didn't want that. So I started to become more obsessed with solving that problem than building my own brand. And yet I was incredibly grateful to have had that experience. It's a really cool, really unique experience to have your product in stores and to see that product in stores. But I didn't love that experience more than the feeling of helping another founder. And I realized, oh, that's again, doing the thing only I can do. A lot of people can put brands out, but what's the one thing I can do? It's like, well, I'm happy to explain this very complicated world and help people navigate it in a way that's better for the retailers and for the small businesses. What better thing could I do with my time than that? And that was a real moment for me when I said, okay, this is the thing I want to do. Now, how do I start doing that?
I think it's really smart and brave that you recognize that because sometimes we'll just like beat a dead horse and it's like someone's like, it's dead. Okay, get off.
Well, I also think going back to being a trend spotter, that's one of the things I do where I'm like, call it for myself, where I'm like, I've got 18 months and I can either run out the clock, or I can use that momentum to go to the next thing. And so
Yeah.
it is hard. It's hard when I'm still always going to be that person that was a trend spotter. I see the future and I'm like, oh goodness, I can either be a part of it or I can kind of let this thing dwindle.
So what is the future? In your realm of what you know and who you advise, what the fuck is going to happen? Because retail is an abysmal situation right now.
You know, there are lots of things that people are looking at and they see things as abysmal, and I have a lot of hope and a lot of optimism because I don't know, because I've always been a part of founder communities. I think we innovate and we come up with solutions to problems because our livelihoods depend on it,
Yeah.
right? We don't have time to pontificate and not find solutions to problems because our very, like, the ability to feed our families depends on us figuring this stuff out to some extent or maintaining the lifestyle we've built, right? And so I always bet on founders and we have to figure it out, you know? And I think one thing we should always remember, I think there's a moment now where there's so much anxiety. And I always think about the fact that, we vote once a year. Many people only every four. We consume every single day of our lives, right? We're making those decisions. We have so much power to decide how we spend that money, what companies we support. And so I think we're going to need some reminders around that, right? That we are very empowered. I remember when one of my girlfriends, Jenny of Jenny's Ice Creams, challenged me years ago to start actually like stop fast fashion and spend money with female founded brands. And it was an amazing change for me. But it also, I didn't realize how empowered I would feel. Like I'm supporting a female founder. Like my dollars are like that energy is directly going to say, I love what you're doing. And when people ask me what I'm wearing, I love saying, do you know this designer? She makes amazing things, or this is a small family business. I'd love for you to support it. And so I think it's more of that. And I think that, you know, there's been a lot of talk about retail is dying. I mean, do we all remember when they said print was dead? And I would say bad print is, and it should be. We remember when TV was dead. And then now you have like the most amazing talent ever on TV, so I think retail is ripe for a reinvention. And I think that it's not always that everything's wrong, but we've got to think through a lot of supply chain issues, right? There are a lot of those things that need to be improved. And we need to think about what customers are ultimately looking for, what that experience needs to be. But it's really down to authenticity. And I always think about customers in two ways, right? Are they looking to aspire to, or are they looking for a reflection, right? And I think in your own customers, you can see many women buy your brand, people buy your product because it's reflecting their values. But then there's still that group that's really aspiring to be a Rebecca Minkoff girl, right? And it's thinking of, how do I serve both of those audiences, right? Those who are aspiring into my brand and those who my brand is a reflection of how they see themselves. And so I think the biggest thing is a return to fundamentals in business, right? We need to stop depending on social media tools as marketing strategies, right? Those of us who are OGs, we understand, what it really takes to build a strong, marketing program. And we want to use every cool new tool. But if your brand doesn't stand for anything, the tools don't matter, right? And that's where you start to see those brands where you're like, I don't really get it. So I think there's going to be a sifting of like brands that have really been built around authenticity, around the founders that stand for something. Those are the ones that are really going to shine. And they're going to just double down on the things that are working. And whatever the tool is, they're going to use those tools, but not really be based around a tool being successful for them.
Okay, I'm almost understanding you. At the end, I lost I lost you at the end. I was like,
it's like,
how does that
it's
work?
not about TikTok, like, right? It's like TikTok's not your marketing strategy.
Right.
You do street style. Street style is your marketing strategy. How you
Right.
present that could be on Instagram, it could be your newsletter, it could be your Substack, it might be on TikTok, but the entire thing you've owned for decades is incredible street style, right?
Right.
Any tool that comes, you can throw it on Pinterest. You can use any tool you want
Right.
to communicate. You know what I
That
mean?
makes sense. Yeah.
But you've owned that. You've said, for us in this brand, showing me on the street, like me being a New Yorker, being out there is an incredible, like I think of that as one of the most important elements of your brand. How are you with the product? I shop off of you, literally. I'm like, I love how she looks in that bag, done, right?
Right.
That's something that's very authentic to your brand. And a lot of other brands have copied that you've been doing forever.
Interesting. I wish they paid me for that. So where can people buy your book, buy your courses, hire you?
It's all at tinawells.com.
Okay. It's the world of Tina Wells and the books as well. So they can, okay.
Yeah. And they're at Target stores. If you have the little ones, they're in middle grade at Target, target.com.
I love it. My last two questions for you are what I ask all my guests. What would we be surprised to know about you, aside the fact that you have 115 cousins? Do you know all their names is what I want to know.
I don't think so. I'm from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is probably more well known for being Amish country. So when I used to go home to visit my parents, I would definitely drive behind horse and carriage, and it felt like I was going back to that M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Village. Definitely, yeah. And my local Target at home does have parking for a horse and carriage. No,
I love that. I love that. And then what is a piece of advice someone's given to you that was helpful or that you'd like to pass on that's yours?
My dad would always say, even from a very young age, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And what I started to understand he meant by it is, just because you have a plan doesn't even mean you're going to follow it. It just means in case of emergency, you have a roadmap. And I think that was really helpful advice for me to always, if I feel out of sorts, I make a plan. It doesn't mean that I'm sticking to the plan. It means this is in a case of emergency. You've got something to refer back to.
And how many times in your life have you had to use it?
A lot, but versions of.
Yeah,
I think once I write it, I feel settled. And I think that's what he was always trying to give me, was just the security blanket. And
totally.
if you need it, great, but just so you have it there.
Yep. Yeah, makes sense. I love it. Well, it was so good to see you. I wish we could just chat and catch up
We will
soon.
soon.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank you guys for listening to today's episode. I also want to ask you to rate and review the show wherever you listen to podcasts. I know it's a pain in the butt, but it actually helps with search and algorithms. So if you love this podcast, it is an easy way to get it more visible and out there. I also want you to follow me on Instagram at Rebecca Minkoff, at RM Superwomen, and be sure to check out my book, Fearless, The New Rules for Unlocking Creativity, Courage, and Success. Thank you again, and you will hear from me next week.